Hey, you know what's delicious? Wrong. Oatmeal cream pies. It's like finding a little piece of buried treasure. That's fantastic. And you know what makes it so fantastic? Is that it was tightly wrapped and sitting in a place where you'd expect to find an oatmeal cream pie. Oatmeal cream pies are good, but you know what's less appetizing than that? It's finding an oatmeal cream pie right in here. Theoretically, that's a really bad idea for me to eat this. I don't think you get cholera from one bite. I actually was so delicious, but I think we can agree that it was somewhat less appetizing because of its context. But even though I might be willing to eat a little bit of oatmeal cream pie out of the trash, in desperation, this right here, that's just too much. I don't think we can do that. Context affects things. Context is the most basic level of thing that you need to look at when you want to understand the Bible, or really anything, because everything has stuff going on around it. And if you want to make sense of it, you have to be aware of that stuff. This is something that you are enormously intuitive about in the rest of life, but that sometimes, myself included, it can be tough to remember to do when it comes to the Bible. So last time around we talked about great big tip number 1 for understanding the Bible better is to observe first, and then and only then interpret or get to the meaning second. There are a whole bunch of things that go into that first step of observation, and the first and most obvious thing that goes into that first step is trying to get a sense of the context on a bunch of different levels. So if somebody says you got to look at a passage in context, what they usually mean is you got to look at it in the context of the words that are on either side of it. And that's important, and we're going to get to that in another video. But in this video, I want to talk about the most basic level of taking something in context. And that is just looking around and making a note of where we are and when we are. This is definitely a true statement coming up right here in a world where there aren't a ton of things that are true statements anymore. Everything that's ever happened somewhere and at some time. Nothing that has ever happened nowhere and at no time. I think that worked. So much of what something means, because everything means something, has to do with when and where it occurred. And it's not very hard to game this thing out. Somebody once famously said, "I believe in one thing only, the power of the human will." Now, that statement sounds, nice and inspiring, but who said it? Well, depending on where we put that on our time and location graph, it can mean a lot of different things. Like you might picture one of the great scientists of the Age of Enlightenment or the scientific or industrial revolution in a lab trying to figure things out, and there with all of their experiments behind them saying, "This is a triumph of the human spirit. I believe in the power of the human will. We have decoded how to harness energy from the atom." Okay, that could be interesting. Maybe it's some great general from ancient times who overcame all odds to liberate his people and is celebrating the human will to overcome the oppressor. Or maybe it was Joseph Stalin who said that while he was in the process of murdering 60 million people. You see, these platitudes, which is all they are when divorced from context, could mean anything. And as much as I'm really a big fan of the Bible and believe that God is behind it, the Bible works the same way. It's still words on a page, and if you divorce it from its moment in time and its location on earth, it could mean anything. So one of the first things to do, if we really want to wrap our brain around not just the hard parts of the Bible, but any parts of the Bible, is to think about when did this happen and where did this happen? And more specifically, to get a sense of that grid as a tool to give us a location for an ideological moment in history. If somebody came out today and was like, "I think it's time for us to consider moving away from slavery, but we shouldn't be too hasty or it could destroy important economic mechanisms," you would rightly be like, "Wow, so you're a racist. That's disgusting and appalling." And you would be right. But if somebody said that at the height of slavery in America in like 1820, you would need to say, "Wow, you are libertarian and progressive, and you understand the value of the human, and you're willing to say things that aren't very popular right now, but that you know are right, even though you might have to suffer the consequences for that." Likewise with the Bible. When we get into the New Testament, when we get into a passage like Matthew chapter 11, where Jesus is early in his ministry and he's answering questions that the followers of John the Baptist are asking him about, hey, are you actually the Messiah? And Jesus gives an answer that cites a few key references from the prophet Isaiah. Man, if we try to extract that out and interpret it in light of the right now moment on the graph, it's not going to make any sense at all. If we interpret it on the right then moment on the graph, not just 1st century AD, but 1st century AD in Judea or Galilee, as it were, then it's going to make sense. Because this simple little answer that he gives, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. You see, at that moment on the graph, his audience would take that as, whoa! Jesus just straight up claimed to be the Messiah, the servant, the one who would fulfill the promises to Abraham, Moses, and David. He is holding this out as being the advent of the kingdom. And if you're reading that from a right now perspective, you're like, sounds more like a wizard who does cool magic tricks and maybe like one of those creepy televangelists who tricks people into thinking they're healed. It reads totally differently. But read in the right context, from the perspective of the moment where it happened, we know that everybody in the audience would have been enormously familiar with the theological history of Israel, enormously familiar with the promises and the glimmer of hope that happens at the end of what Christians call the Old Testament. And they would have been overwhelmingly beat down and disappointed by the repeated conquests of Assyria, Babylon, the ownership under Persia, Alexander's generals, the Romans, and it's just this long series of brutal oppression. But there's still this hope. But it's a desperate hope, and it's a long shot hope. Jesus comes out and says this stuff. This is a profound, bold answer to the question that, frankly, would have jumped off the page for them, and that we have to engage in careful, historical, contextual thought in order to understand and appreciate at even a fraction of the level that a simple reader at the time it was said or written would have understood. So part of what it takes to read the Bible or anything that humans have produced from a different time than our own is, in a sense, kind of like the same skill set as becoming bilingual. We have to learn how to speak a different language. We have to learn how to hear in a different language and to see through a different set of eyes, which is actually a pretty cool skill to develop, especially living in a day and age where people kind of hate each other and things are a gigantic dumpster fire in terms of interactions with people outside of our individual tribes. It could be argued, no, it is going to be argued right now, that whether you're a Christian or not, the principle of historical context in interpreting the ideas of others is really applicable to the here and now. And people who get good at this, I think, are going to be better at stepping across those cultural divides even today, and might be able to have more productive, better relationships with people from other tribes. The great thing about interpretation is, again, whether you're into the Bible or not, this is a skill set that's going to make us better at theoretically pretty much everything, and way better at understanding a document that holds itself out as being the most important thing ever, and communication from the divine. In the next video, we're going to do some pretty practical pointers on how to actually go and do this and learn about it for yourself. Thanks a ton for watching the 10-Minute Bible Hour. If you really, really like what's going on here, I mean, not if you only sort of like it, but if you really like it, I would be grateful if you would consider supporting the program at patreon.com/TMBH. I know that's a big ask, and this is just an internet relationship, but it's been a huge help. Thanks to all of those of you who do support the program, and thanks to all of those of you who don't, but are still here. Either way, I'm thrilled that you're a part. Thanks for being here. I'm Matt. We'll see you soon.